You're a growth-minded leader, possibilities everywhere. You believe your team can do more, be more, and achieve more. And you're bringing new ideas, casting vision, and talking about what's next constantly. So why does it feel like you're the only one? Why did every conversation about change feel like you're pushing a boulder uphill? Why do your ideas land with silence? Why does it feel like you're dragging them forward instead of leading them there? Here's what you've probably told yourself. They're just stuck. They're comfortable. They don't want to grow. They don't see the vision. What if that's not the real problem? I'm Tammy, and welcome to A Leader's Purpose podcast. Today, we're diving into a question that a client asked me last week that I could not stop thinking about it. And I think the answer is going to surprise you. So listen in and let's do this thing. So here's the deal. I was on a call with a client, and this client is a brilliant leader. She has a high-performing team. She genuinely cares about her people. And then she asked me this, Tammy, how do I lead when I'm growth-minded, but my team is fixed-minded? They have a fixed mindset. I could hear her exhaustion in her tone and the frustration. And not only that is the loneliness of being the only one who sees what's possible for the team. Like, she knew her team could be more and do more, and that they were ready for the next level. And she's tried everything. She brought in speakers, she shared articles, she did trainings, she had the real talk conversations, she modeled enthusiasm, but nothing really shifted. And she's starting to wonder if maybe she's the problem, or maybe they're just never going to get there. You relate. If you're nodding along right now, I want you to know something, that you're not alone in this, and you're not crazy. What your experience is real. You share a new initiative with blank stares. You invite feedback and get crickets, or worse, the feedback that you get is telling them your limitations and what you need, not how to move forward. You talk about innovation and here, but we've always done it this way. You cast a vision and watch eyes glaze over. It's exhausting. And because you're not asking for perfection, you're asking them to be open, to try, to grow. You're asking them to see the vision. And when they don't, it feels personal. Maybe like you're not inspiring enough, or you're not clear enough, or maybe you're just expecting too much. So here's what I told my client. And honestly, when I shared it with her, she got quiet for a second because this is what she was expecting to hear. And I want you to hear this. Because what if the problem isn't that they're fixed mind? What if it's not that they have a fixed mindset? What if the problem is that you're leading from a fixed mindset patterns that you didn't even realize you have? Look at it for a second. What if you're leading from a fixed mindset patterns that you didn't even realize you had? And I know you're probably thinking like, wait, Tammy, I'm the growth-minded one. I'm the one that's frustrated. And I believe you. You are growth-minded about yourself, about learning, about possibility. You wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you don't consider yourself growth-minded, if you're not open to growth. But the thing is, by being growth-minded about you, it doesn't automatically mean you're leading growth-mindedly. And let me show you what I mean, okay? So stick with me here. Number one, they don't get it, or they don't catch the vision. When you say they don't get it, you made a fixed assumption about their capacity. You've decided they can't see but what if they can? What if they just don't see themselves in it yet? What if they see the vision it's possible, but they haven't embodied it yet? You remember the be, do, have, that be part. What if they haven't embodied that yet? That's a fixed belief about their potential disguised as frustration. So it's you believing that they can't see it, which is really just a fixed belief about their potential. Okay. So it's disguised as frustration. But again, we've got to look at ourselves first. We got to look at what our beliefs are, what our thoughts are. This is why I say, think about what you're thinking about, get curious about it. Why do you believe that they just don't get it? And what about it are they not getting? So at number 2, I need to convince them. So you think your job is to sell harder, to persuade them, to make a more compelling case, to try to get them on board. But that whole approach assumes that they're resistant and that you have to overcome it. But what if they're not resistant? What if they're uncertain? What if they don't trust the process yet because you're moving faster than they can integrate, or the vision hasn't been explained to them fully? And you're trying to convince was trying to convince actually a fixed approach to leading change. So again, it's their fixed belief, fixed approach. And this third pattern is they're not changing fast enough. I have heard this multiple times they're growth minded or they're just not getting it fast enough. You have a timeline. 3 months in, you expected more. 6 months in, you're wondering why they're still asking the same questions. But that timeline, that's your timeline based on your processing speed and your comfort with change. When you're frustrated by their pace, you're operating from a fixed belief about how growth should look. And we get it. There's deadlines, there's a timeline. But when it comes to change, you've got to ask yourself, is this my timeline? Is this based on my processing speed? Because again, as a leader, we work on different leadership skills. We work on being a growth-minded individual intentionally. Are your people investing in their growth, in their mindset? Because their processing speed may be way slower than yours. This is something that as a coach, I have to realize that I am in this work all the time. My clients, some of them, this is the first time they've heard it in this way. So though some clients get it within the first couple of sessions, there's some that take longer. And the timeline is not based on what my assumption is. It's based on what their capability is, how they work. And this goes into your core beliefs, core motivations. This goes into our core avoidances. Because if we just say they're not changing fast enough, we're making the assumption that they're not changing the way that we want them to change. It might be more internal than external. They may be processing it at a different way, and their results may look a little different. So just saying they're not changing fast enough actually has a really fixed belief in there about how growth should look. So the fourth pattern here that I've seen and that I wanted to share is that they're just fixed mindset people. The moment you label somebody as anything, you've done the most fixed mindset thing possible, because they can feel when you don't expect more for them. They can feel when you don't have faith in them, or you don't feel like they can grow. They can feel that more than you realize. You've put them in a box and decided who they are. And so have you had a boss do that to you? Just decide that this is what you're capable of and that not to expect more from you? And of course I lived up to that, because why wouldn't I? It's really hard when someone has decided who you are. It's really hard to convince them otherwise. Then you put them into a convincing mode, and let's face it, they might not even be willing to convince you. They may have checked out. They may have decided that this is not the position for them, and they're secretly looking on LinkedIn for another role. When you decide who they are and you put them in that box, you are limiting their ability. You're limiting their growth. Growth mindset means believing people can change. So if you've written them off, you're contradicting your own values. And believe me, this is something that happens because you watch the patterns. This is why we don't look at behaviors to determine motivations. We don't look at behaviors to determine outcomes. We look at what's going on in the inside. What are their fears? What are their strengths? What are their core motivations? Because again, if they're not catching the vision, how are you throwing it out? Are you doing it in a way that they can see it? Or are you doing it in a way that it comes from what's in it for them, and looking at what is their core motivation? Are you using vocabulary that they understand? And are you touching on the part of the project or the growth or the initiative that speaks to their heart? So here's what's actually happening. When you're trying to lead growth-mindedly, while believing you need to change them, fix them, or convince them, or speed them up, This creates an incongruence, frustration, and it's making you take on more responsibility than it's needed. The words you say, it's all about growth, but your energy says, why aren't you growing fast enough? Your team can feel that gap. And that's what kills trust. That's what creates resistance. And that's what makes them pull back. So let's make this a little visual for you, because a lot of this is really just understanding what motivates you is not what's motivating other people. So let's think about a garden. You can't force a seed to grow by yelling at it. You can't demand fruit before the plant is ready, right? Like, as much as we would love, I wait all year for the peaches to be ready. I love fresh peaches. We have a couple of peach trees that finally this year have started growing, but it took years for that. You can create the right conditions. Good soil, consistent water, adequate sunlight, in the right spacing, and you can give it space for roots to expand. When those conditions are right, the growth is inevitable, right? When those conditions, you're giving it the tools, the resources, what it needs to grow, then the growth happens in its own time. Cherries and peaches grow different than spinach and lettuce, which need way less time. Not because you forced it, but because the environment made it natural. And so instead of demanding change, the growth-minded leader isn't about changing your team. It's about allowing and giving it the tools and creating the environment where growth becomes inevitable. And that starts with examining your identity alignment, not theirs. So if the issue isn't how to fix my fixed mindset team, so what is the issue? The issue is, are you leading from who you actually are? Or are you leading from who you think they need in order to make them change? And here's some questions that can actually, that you really need to ask yourself. Am I creating psychological safety, or am I performing growth? There's a big difference between being open to feedback and saying you're open while secretly having no one challenge you. Your team can feel the difference, and they all can sense the performance. They won't engage. It's a trust thing. When they know that they can come to you and ask questions without being belittled, without being berated, without feeling like they are not getting it, then the growth mindset happens naturally. That's giving them the tools and the resources and creating the environment for growth. So another question is, what do I actually believe about my team's capacity? Not what you say you believe, but what do you actually believe when you're frustrated on a Tuesday afternoon? Do you believe they can grow, or do you believe they should have grown by now? The should have, I always ask, don't should on yourself. Why should they have grown? What have you done as their leader in order to create the environment? This can they grow is growth minded. Should have grown by now is fixed. So understanding what you believe about your team's capability, this is again where you need to ask yourself and think about what you're thinking about. Get curious about some of the thoughts that you have, because it leads you to answering these questions. Another question that I want you to ask yourself is, am I trusting my process, or am I copying someone else's playbook? If you're leading the way the book said, or the training said, or the way you saw someone else do it, but it doesn't align with who you are at your core, your team will sense the misalignment. You can't lead authentically from someone else's blueprint. You can't lead authentically from someone else's motivations or from their values. You've got to know your own. And this is why we start with you as the leader. And we start looking at, how do your strengths show up? What is your core motivation? What are your core avoidances? Because even the way you speak, naturally, it's going to start giving you evidence of that. And then once you are familiar with it, you get to change that if you need to. And then the final question here that I really want you to ask yourself is, what limiting beliefs do I have about what good leadership looks like? Maybe you believe good leaders always have the answers. Maybe you believe good leaders never show doubt. Maybe you believe that good leaders should be able to inspire anyone. Those beliefs are keeping you from being the leader your team actually needs. Your team doesn't need to have all the answers. Honestly, asking them for answers is really what's going to make this initiative grow. Having a leader that never shows doubt, none of us are certain about what's going to come in the future. They know it, you know it, but if you never show any doubt, then they believe that you have a fixed mindset, that they can never live up to what's possible. And so then they start backing away instead of leaning forward. And maybe you believe that the good leaders should be able to inspire anyone. If they should, again, why should you? You're a human just like anyone else. And sometimes we don't, even as a coach, there's times that people are like, say something inspiring. And I'm like, I don't really feel inspired in the moment. I feel practical. We are humans. We have all ranges of emotions. And there's nothing that says that you should be able to or you should need to inspire your team every moment of every day. What if you cultivated, let's use that garden term, cultivated a team that inspires each other, that they all will pick up the baton and they will lead it themselves instead of you always having to be the one to initiate it. That's what really a good leader does, is they empower their team. Okay, so you know me. I like to give you practical stuff. I'm working on more storytelling. Because I'm a teacher at heart, and I want you to actually take the steps, and I want you to get the transformation, the change. But I also know that if I don't connect with it, then it doesn't give, the practical steps don't help. So what does this actually look like in practice? Stop trying to get buy-in. Start creating ownership. Buy-in means agree with my answer. Ownership means help me create the answer. Instead of saying, here's a new strategy, what do you think? Here's a new initiative, what do you think? Here's the new thing we're going to implement, what do you think? Here's the problem we're trying to solve. What are you seeing from where you sit? When people feel ownership, growth naturally happens. You're cultivating that environment that people want to grow in. Model growth by being wrong out loud. Like I said, your team doesn't need you to be perfect. They need you to see that growth is safe. Now remember, this success and failure are not opposite. We need to understand that in order to be successful, sometimes we do fail. And let's just fail forward. Let's fail growing and trying versus not being able to make a wrong move. Be wrong sometimes. Say, I don't know. Share what you're learning. Talk about what you're struggling with. When your team sees you growing messily, it gives them permission to do the same. It gives them permission to also share how they're growing. Also, when they see that you're growing, they're watching you. They're learning from you, and you are helping them create beliefs about what leadership is. When they see that you as a leader are still growing and still learning and actively trying to grow in your leadership, they're going to be able to do the same thing. They're going to want to do it. The next one, this one's huge. Stop labeling behavior. Start getting curious about fear. When someone pushes back or stays quiet, don't label it as resistance or fixed mindset. Get curious about what the fear is underneath. Remember, they're acting out of their motivations. They're not working with the same lens that you are. It's so important. And this is the work that really matters, is when you understand, even if you don't know what their motivation is, you can still speak to the hard hit gut. You could still speak to other motivations without understanding exactly who's in front of you. It works a lot better when you know, but a lot of times we won't know exactly. But I almost guarantee that they're not working from the same lens as you are. So what do they need to be true for it to feel safe? What's your biggest concern about this? And what's their biggest concern? What is a different perspective that they could be coming with? What are they afraid of versus why are they not growing, or why are they not taking action? An example of this is I've had a lot of conversations with leaders about AI because their people are afraid that AI is going to take their job. Or they're afraid that AI is going to make their job irrelevant. So looking at that, is AI the real problem? No, I truly believe, just like the industrial revolution, AI is here to stay and we need to work with it. But we also need to AI proof our lives. But what could they be asking about? They could be asking, is it better than me? No. And you can help them by identifying, like, what is the true fear? What is the true avoidance here? Because that is understanding that, because growth happens when fear is acknowledged, not ignored. So when we have things actively we're trying to avoid, then it stops us from growing. And so when you understand that their motivations are not your motivations, you're not working from the same lens, you can ask the right questions to help them think about what they're thinking about and get curious about what's stopping them. Align your identity with your actions. So you can't create conditions for growth if you're not clear on who you are as a leader. What are your core values? Not what they should be. There's that should word again, but what are they actually? What what they are actually. Blah, that came out weird. So what are your core values that you make decisions through? How are you wired? What's your unique way of leading? What are your core motivations? What are your core avoidances? When you're leading from alignment, from deep self-knowledge and trust in your own process, your team can feel it. You don't need to convince them. You don't need to be so grounded that they feel so safe to discover who they are. No, if they feel, I said that wrong. Sorry. My note. They need you to be so grounded that they feel safe to discover who they are. They need you to be so grounded in who you are that they can ask you questions, that they can bring different ideas, that they can explore what's possible. They can start building that growth mindset from a place of a foundation and environment that you created for them. And the last one here is trust the timeline. Growth is not linear. It doesn't happen on your schedule. Your job isn't to speed it up. Your job is to stay so consistent, so aligned, and trust that when the conditions are right, growth will happen. Each individual is going to grow at their own time. That doesn't mean that they have a fixed mindset. That just might mean that they have a lot of limiting beliefs that they haven't uncovered yet. That they're working from a place of trauma or a place of scarcity, and you're giving them the environment, you're giving them the ability to really see what's possible. So I want you to hear me here. You are the growth-minded leader you believe you are. But growth-minded leadership doesn't mean you're fixing your team. It doesn't mean that you automatically have a growth-minded leadership style. It means trusting your people enough to create the conditions where they can choose growth for themselves. It means examining your identity. It means examining and leaning into your alignment and looking at what your limiting beliefs are first. This means being so grounded in who you are that your team feels safe enough to discover who they are. So stop asking, why do I lead this fixed-minded team? And start asking, how do I create an environment where growth becomes inevitable? And it starts with you, your identity, your alignment, and your willingness to lead from who you actually are, not from perfection, not from knowing it all, not from like assuredness, but from who you actually are, your core beliefs, your core avoidances, from knowing what your vision is. Because you can't force a garden to grow, but you can become the creative leader who cultivates the soil, the water, the sunlight, the space. And when you do, growth doesn't just happen in your team, it's going to happen in you as well. So if this conversation's hitting home, if you're realizing that the real work isn't out there with your team, but it's in here with your identity, let's talk. Book your aligned leadership call, tammymurraycoaching.com/call. This is 45 minutes. This is not a normal sales call. This is a strategic clarity call. Like, we are going to look at you as a leader. We're going to start to see, what are you doing? What are some of the beliefs that you have about your team? Because it's amazing that once that comes to light, they lose power over you. Those beliefs, you can refute them immediately when you see them, when you realize what beliefs you have. And so then you can create the conditions that your team actually needs. So get on the call. tamimarcoaching.com/call. Again, this is the best thing you can do for not only your team, but for yourself. Because when we are leading through got a notification. When we're leading through our alignment and our foundation, creating the environment is a lot more fun than trying to fix people. Creating the growth in yourself allows for the growth in others. Great. So get on a call. It'll be fun, I promise. But my name is Tammy. Thank you so much for being here. Choose joy until joy chooses you, and I will talk to you soon.